All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Hallie. I'm a member of the Quad Education team, and today we'll be talking about what to know about majoring in pre-med. For those of you who don't know, Quad Education is an admissions consulting company, and we work with students and families through the entire, I have a little bit of a cold, through the entire admissions process. And today we'll dive into what to think about if you want to major in pre-med. So we'll have our panelists introduce themselves. We'll talk about what a pre-med program is, how to choose your pre-med major, what to expect as that major, how to excel in your courses. Excuse me. We'll talk about extracurriculars that boost your med school application, talk about how to navigate the MCAT process, and then we'll open things up for Q&A. So if you have questions through this, pop those in the Q&A box. We'll get to those at the end. Additionally, we are recording this. So if you miss something, we'll be sending this in an email over the next few days for you to have access to. So we have Jennifer and Dominique with us today who are going to walk us through this topic. Jennifer, can you introduce yourself for us?
Absolutely. Delighted to be with you all this evening. Thank you for making the time to join us. And whether you're a senior who's applying this year or you're thinking down the road, we're delighted to have the opportunity to share some of our thoughts and ideas with you and also get your questions answered. My name is Jennifer, and I've been with Quad for a few years now, working as an admissions consultant. And prior to that, directed a college guidance program at a secondary school in my home state of Maryland, where I also coordinated the IB program. Before that, I directed study abroad programs throughout the U.S. at schools like WashU and St. Louis and small liberal arts colleges across the country, where I help students find their best fit study abroad program that matched with their academic needs as a college student. And then originally my graduate degree in comparative culture in Japanese history I got when I lived in Tokyo, Japan, and did my undergraduate work at Harvard in English and East Asian Studies.
Great. Thanks so much for being here, Jennifer. And then Dominique, can you introduce yourself for us?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here tonight. My name is Dominique. I have quite a bit of experience with this topic. When I was in college at Dartmouth College, I actually went through this entire process. I have since decided that medicine is not the route that I'm looking to take, but I basically did this all start to finish, so I kind of know what it takes kind of firsthand to go through this process. Additionally, as far as my experience as an admissions counselor, I've been with Quad for about a year and a half now. I work with students through all grade levels to help them choose and figure out which extracurriculars they want to do, course selection, all those things up through senior year where we work on the applications together. Some of my experience leading up to this has been working alongside the admissions office as a tour guide during my time at Dartmouth, and then after my time at Dartmouth, working as an alumni interviewer where I was able to interview prospective students and then give my feedback to the admissions committee. Since graduating from college, I have worked in public education for 5 years, coaching middle and high school students through this process, the early candidacy development process, and helping them through the application process itself. And I'm super happy to be here and excited to talk about this.
Great. Thanks so much for being here as well. So let's dive in and talk about what is a pre-med program. Jennifer, you want to start us off here?
Sure, absolutely. So the first thing to understand is that a pre-med major per se doesn't actually exist in that format. It's a program, a set of courses that are required by medical schools for admissions. And then we want to talk with you about what kinds of majors are going to make the most sense for you to do as you're launching into a medical school trajectory. So the courses that are part of a pre-med track or pre-med program will cover basic sciences and labs. They will really prepare you for the work that you're going to be doing in medical school. And they're also going to provide you with the foundational knowledge that you need to be successful in the MCAT, which is obviously part of the required admissions components when you're applying to medical school. A couple of things to think about here is that some of the courses, at least in my experience, especially when I was an academic advisor at Washington University in St. Louis, some of the courses that you need to take as a pre-med student, like organic chemistry, are almost designed to intimidate you out of continuing on your journey. And so you need to be up for maybe some rigor and some challenge. Even if chemistry has come naturally to you in high school, you're going to need to kind of level up and get ready for the challenge that this coursework is going to pose to you in your undergraduate years. And just kind of stay focused on your end goal as you're going through these required components in biology, in chemistry, in physics, and in the math preparation that you need to do.
All right, awesome. And so I'll go into some examples of, pre-med majors. And so like we just mentioned, there is no, at most schools, pre-med major where that's the one thing that you're going to be studying. You will choose a major to focus in on and to take a set of courses as your main area of study outside of the pre-med track classes that you will take. And so for some of you, this may be very much related to the classes you're taking. So you may say, hey, biology is my passion, chemistry is my passion. I'm going to take 10, 12, 15, however many classes it is in biology or chemistry and have that be my major. But for some of you, it may be, hey, I really want to be an English major. I love creative writing and I want to study English. That's awesome. And you can absolutely do that alongside, again, taking those prerequisite pre-med track, biology, chemistry, physics, math, et cetera, classes. And so there is no kind of right or wrong way to do this. If you absolutely do not have to be, and there really is, I don't think, any advantage to being a hard science major. So just picking something that's very much related to medicine. If that is truly, your area of passion and interest, go ahead and pursue it. There's nothing wrong with that. But if there is something you'd like to do that's related to the humanities or the arts or something that's just a little bit different than that, there's also absolutely nothing wrong with that. And it can help you stand out as a bit of a more well-rounded candidate as well. Something to keep in mind, however, if you do choose something that's a little bit less kind of STEM focused as your major, you will need to be much more kind of diligent about planning ahead, knowing that there will be less classes that you're already going to be taking for your major that are also going to fit in the pre-med track. So, for example, you have to take, depending on the college, usually it's 4 chemistry classes. So you'll take chemistry 1, chemistry 2, and then organic chemistry 1 and organic chemistry 2. All of that could fit very neatly into a chemistry major. So you can kind of double dip and count both of those courses. So if that's what you wanted to do. But for example, if you were a studio art major, right, you're not taking those chemistry classes anyways. And so you need to have more space in your schedule to make sure you get all of your art classes in and all of these science classes in, because there likely won't be much overlap. Not sure if anybody has anything to add on that.
All right, let's talk a little bit more about pre-med majors tracks.
So here are some statistics that kind of outline what we've been discussing thus far. You can see that there's no amazing correlation. Like, if you major in the humanities, you're half as likely to get admitted or twice as likely to get admitted or anything. And what is really, I think, good advice that I've heard over the years from pre-med advisors and science faculty and doctors who are practicing is that you'll spend the rest of your career really focused in on your practice area in your clinical practice. You're going to spend all of the time that you're in medical school really preparing for that and gaining the skills that you need to practice your clinical field effectively. Prior to that, if your passion lies in a field that is not within the STEM umbrella, it's your time to pursue it. And there can be some really interesting synergies and combinations that come from a degree in the humanities or social sciences with the pre-med coursework that go on to be really useful to you down the road. And some examples of those that my students have done in the past include things like anthropology and sociology, where you're studying how a culture is formed and what a culture values, how a society is structured, and what family and educational systems mean in that particular locale. You can look at history, and there's a lot that we can all learn from history. And that might, even be a special niche area in a school that you're looking at. Might offer something like the history of science that might just be right up your alley. Just don't feel like you have to do a bio or a chem major. If that's your passion and that's what you already know that you love to do, by all means, that's absolutely what you should do in college. But you also have other choices beyond that. You can pursue a language. If you have a Spanish passion for Spanish language or the French language, you can major in that in college and do your pre-medical coursework and pursue research and internships in your summers and still be a very competitive candidate for medical school admissions.
Yeah, and that's all incredible advice. And I think to just kind of bounce, off of all of that, as far as choosing your major, again, don't choose a major just because you feel like you have to. Something that Jennifer has not mentioned yet that it's very much related to what she was just talking about is, I'll just kind of give a little bit of my personal experience. So I actually was an anthropology major, and I was studying kind of how humans interact to form cultures and, all these different things as part of anthropology. But I also was very much interested in public health. And so what I was able to do is modify my major and do almost a create your own major, which a lot of colleges have. And so I was able to kind of piece together courses in the anthropology department, in Dartmouth's geography department, in the Latin American studies department, to really talk about different kind of public health initiatives and things like that. And that's something I was really passionate about, bringing healthcare access to those people, whomever they may be, that just lack that access in our world. And so I was really focused on studying that through a variety of different disciplines. And then I was also doing my pre-med biology, chemistry, kind of science, math coursework on the side of that. And so just like we were just talking about, don't just pick something because you feel like you have to, or don't be afraid to pick something out of the box. Also, this is a great opportunity to create that really unique personal narrative and story that you're going to have to tell. Just like when you apply to college, you'll have to tell that story again when you apply to medical school. And so it's a good way to be able to say, hey, I have this very specific interest and goal and mission that I would like to, work towards as a physician and through medicine. And here's how I've been very intentional about seeking out academic opportunities in college that's aligned with what I want to do. And so definitely look into those types of kind of create your own major or modified major, all of those different things. And really just think about like what is super, super exciting to you and how can you blend all of your different interests, even if it isn't a modified major. Can you have a major and a minor, or just don't be afraid to pursue what is super authentic to you, because at the end of the day, that's what's going to shine through, and that's what's going to give you that best story to be able to tell, here's what I'm passionate about and here's what I'm doing about it.
Great. Let's talk a little bit about what to expect as a pre-med major.
Yeah, so you want to be attentive to your required courses and sequencing those in the way that your school recommends to you. Usually there's a prescribed order that the school will advise you to take the courses in. And the other aspect of my work on college campuses that was really important for students to consider when students wanted to go abroad is how are you going to complete the required courses on a U.S. transcript with a letter grade and still be able to study abroad. So in the sequence at WashU and other schools that I worked with, usually physics was going to be taken in the junior year. And so what my students would do would be either go abroad in the fall, go abroad in the spring, and be able to take their physics course in the summer, if that is something that can work for you. Some students, and myself included, we needed to work for income that was going to help pay for our school during the school year. So that might not be something that's possible for you, but if it is, that's one way that you can work around it. And if you're aspiring to go abroad and you know that that for whatever reason a summer program is not going to really work for you, there are quite a number, I forget what the statistics are, Dominique or Hallie, maybe you know, but an increasing number of students do take a gap year in between undergraduate and medical school. So that's not something to be afraid of doing in your planning. But as we're listing here, the foundational courses are in bio, a year of bio, a year of Gen Chem, a year of Orgo, and a year of physics. And then most schools require math proficiency, and some also want you to have experience in some of these other fields that are listed. Obviously, you know, the basic graduation requirements for most schools, most universities and colleges are going to cover things like English and social sciences, and you'll be able to make all of those requirements work along with your graduation requirements and not have to do anything extra. But it is very important that if you know that you are on a pre-med track, that you think about very carefully what the advising structure is like at the schools that you're considering, because not all pre-med advising programs are created equal. And it's really key that you get good advice and good planning as you're just developing your course plan, as you're you know, thinking about things like study abroad, internships, and research, so that it all comes together in a plan that makes sense for you.
Yeah, just to jump off all of that, that was kind of a long list of courses. And again, if you want to study abroad and do this long list of courses and major in something that isn't directly related to that long list of courses, you're going to kind of have three separate things that you're going to need to fit into your 4 years. And then add in the pressure of potentially having to have a job over the summer where you can't be that flexible with your time and things like that. Things get a little bit tricky. And so planning ahead is the name of the game. As Jennifer mentioned, finding a really strong advisor that you trust and really leaning on those support systems is so important. Some things that you can do to help kind of mitigate some of that stress is to balance your coursework as much as you can. And so try not to take super challenging classes all in the same term if you can. And that can be really difficult, especially if you're trying to fit in, again, a study abroad and things like that. Time management is also key here. An example I always love to give, even in more general kind of, you know, when I give general advice to students, I always talk about how, you know, you may, you know, if you're sitting in this webinar right now, you're probably already a very strong student and you're thinking about your future and, you know, you're already kind of planning ahead. And so you're definitely probably going to be a competitive applicant for a school and you're doing well in school. The work in college is so different and the structure of college is so different than high school. I think this especially applies to pre-med courses. I'll give you an example. So I went to a science-focused charter school in high school. I was all about biology, chemistry. It was just my favorite. I was in every science-focused club. I was like, oh, intro chem, I got this, no sweat. I took AP bio. I'm sure it's going to be very similar. I struggled a lot. Just to give a few examples, a few things that were different. I met with that class, I believe it was 3 times a week for an hour per day. And so that was just 3 hours of my week. And I was like, great, cool. There's no homework. All we have is tests. And that was it. Your entire grade was just the tests. And so I would kind of just hang around, hang out with friends, not really study. And it just, I already know chemistry. I'm fine. And that really ended up hurting me in the end. And it took me a while to really cultivate those study skills. You're going to find that you're not spending a ton of time. You spend 6-7 hours a day sitting in your chair at school and classes. In college, it might be 2, 3, 4 hours a day that you're actually sitting in a classroom. That being said, don't feel like you have less work. Just much more of that work is very much on you. And so there may be times where, like I said, you don't have homework and you're just being asked to study for an exam that's coming up in 3 weeks. don't slack on that. You need to study every single day. And so it's just building those habits that are a lot different, because homework is built into high school. Time in front of your teacher is very much built into high school. You have to seek out office hours as opposed to being given a study hall, things like that. And so the quicker you can kind of learn that and adapt to that, and just don't take for granted, what may have been easy to you in high school, the better off you'll be, as far as, handling all of the pre-med requirements. And it does come quick, and you do have to start your freshman year, because it just is a lot to handle. And so waiting around to start to kind of get acquainted, you might be able to wait a term or two or we had terms at Dartmouth, it was 3 trimesters, but you may be able to wait like 1 semester to start your pre-med coursework, but that's basically it. So you're not going to have a ton of time to adjust. You just need to jump in and adapt, and, lean on any resources that you have at the school.
Great. Those are fantastic points. All right. So going off of that a little bit more, here are some tips on how to excel in your pre-med courses.
So like anything, you need to have the understanding of how you learn best, right? Some of us learn through hearing, some of us learn through seeing and reading, some of us learn through doing and practical opportunities. So it's really important that when do you learn best? What time of day are you most productive? Are you someone who, like me, sort of like wakes up around 10 o'clock at night and you do your best work in the middle of the night when it's quiet? Are you someone who's really a morning person, and that's when you get your most effective studying done? And especially in this field, it's so important to know and to remember, when you're in the grind of getting through the demanding course load that you have in front of you for pre-med, is that you're not just cramming this information in to pass a test and do well, but you want to have this knowledge base that you're going to build on throughout your medical career. And so you want to be setting yourself up for success in your future career with the first foundational courses that you're taking. And to do that, we encourage you to have an effective note-taking strategy, whether that's good old pen and paper, whether that's working in different documents online. Have the strategy lined up that works really well for you, so that you are able to track the information that you're learning. In class, you're going to have a lot of lectures. Outside of class, you're going to be doing a lot of reading. You're going to have lab notes. You're going to have all the things. And how are you going to maintain that in a way that works for you and you can review really effectively when it comes time to do that? We encourage you to utilize resources that are going to vary at your school of choice where you end up enrolling, but you might have study groups that are offered. You might have additional office hours that are available to you. You might have a graduate student who's a teaching assistant that has office hours and is there to really help coach you through for success. There's going to be academic resource centers and support available at all colleges and universities that can provide peer tutoring and other kinds of ways that are going to really be designed to help you succeed. And they're only going to be useful to you if you take advantage of them and familiarize yourself with where those resources are. Talk to students who are a little bit ahead of you and find out their tips and tricks for succeeding and what's really been effective for them, and then build your own toolbox of ways that you're going to help support your own learning. In this, it's basically, training for a very demanding career down the road. You need to be prepping yourself early and often for managing stress and avoiding burnout. You don't want to save everything up till the end. Like Dominique was saying, you really want to be pacing yourself and practicing a lot of self-care along the way, and finding that balance between how much time and energy are you devoting to your schoolwork and how much time and energy are you taking to make sure you're getting adequate rest and health and sleep and nutrition and all the things that promote health and wellness. So that's a lot to take in right now, but we just like to kind of encourage you to keep that in mind, both during your college prep journey and once you're in college preparing for medical school, that you keep that in mind as well.
All right, let's talk a little bit about extracurriculars.
All right, so there are three kind of main types of extracurriculars listed here that are kind of recommended as far as what to pursue in high school to kind of show admissions committees that you are serious about pursuing the pre-med track at their school. Many or some of them should be STEM related to show that you have kind of sought out science and medical focus opportunities outside of the classroom. It just shows that you're serious about it and that you're actually truly interested in it. And so this can be something like Science Olympiad or I was in a science quiz bowl team. And so that was like a trivia team for science. And that's awesome. Research type of things, anything like that, just to kind of show that you are definitely serious about it and interested in it. That being said, there are all kinds of other things that you can do in high school: sports, music, theater, etc. And so if those are things that you are interested in and passionate about, please pursue them. Don't forego those things just because you feel like you need to fit some pre-med doctor medicine mold. I see a lot of students struggle with that. Like, oh, I'll just forego being in the school play, even though I love theater, because I need to get into a research program this summer or whatever it is. You don't need to do anything, right? There are plenty of ways to make all of this work. To not do something that you're really excited about would honestly only hurt you, because half of the battle with college applications, I would say, is really just having that story to tell about that thing that you really love. And the more that you can speak to that, the more that your true personality and character will shine through. So you want to be able to pursue those things to have the best story and narrative come forward at the end of everything. And then, the other thing as far as showing your character and leadership is the other thing listed here. Just really think about how are the ways that you can cultivate and show the things that are so important that people in the medical field have. And so we're talking compassion, empathy, being kind to others, be that person, right? This will shine through a lot in your letters of recommendation. And that's not something, to take for granted or take lightly. Just being that like super nice person that's always helpful, that your teacher just notices and that you build a good relationship with them, that can go a super long way. And so, being in the right extracurriculars, being involved in STEM, all of these things are important for sure, but also just being that like good person, the person that you would want to be your doctor, will go a long way as well. And so don't forget that as you are going through this grind and this journey throughout high school.
Great. And also, I think that as you're preparing for college, these are also things that you'll want to be thinking about for the extracurriculars that you choose to partake in when you're in college to prepare for med school.
Yeah, and so if we take a look at this list, you'll see some things that'll work in both of those areas. So we're thinking about both how you can position yourself well right now as you're looking forward or in the process of applying to colleges and universities, for how can you put your best foot forward as a pre-med applicant, as well as once you're in college and applying to medical school, how can you do the same there for the medical schools? I would say that in my experience, having a defined research program, participation, some work that you've done independently, and really demonstrates your passion and your interest in the subject is really key, both not just to like get into a school or get into a university. You want to be thinking about, how am I going to form the area of study that I'm interested in? And you do that by doing extra additional study beyond what you're able to do in your high school classes. So whether it's online research opportunities, there's a host of ways you can do that, whether it might be a short or a long summer program, depending on your availability to do that and balance it with other interest areas that you have. That can really help to hone and shape and define the area of medicine that you're most interested in. And doing that early only helps you in the long run. And on the other hand, if you're not at all sure and you just want to try out a couple of different areas here or there, these are some great ways to do it. You want to get some hands-on experience by volunteering. If you're looking at veterinary work, there's always a tremendous need for help at animal shelters and rescues, local hospitals and nursing homes. Increasingly, students are finding ways to volunteer with hospice as well and understand the life cycle and the holistic aspect of patient care. I have some students who have gotten part-time jobs at pharmacies or at doctor's offices where they're being paid, and then they're also maybe able to do some shadowing there as well, or through contacts that they make there, and really build out the number of hours that you're able to spend observing and learning and watching others do the field that you're interested in joining. That's a very important aspect of this whole process. And then, you may be able to supplement that with taking some additional coursework online or at a community college. You may opt to, in your high school years, do a pre-college program that'll expose you to some different aspects of medical practice and help you hone your interest. Or maybe, like some of my students are very focused even now in 9th, 10th, 11th grade on, I want to work in cancer research. I want to work in OBGYN. I know that I want to go into pediatrics or dermatology. So you may already have that passion. A lot of times that'll come from a family experience or your own personal experience. I want to do sports medicine because I know what it's like to recover from an injury, and I feel like I could really relate to my patients in that area. So you may have that really defined already. And then you can find summer programs that will help you develop that skill and that knowledge even further. So these are just some suggestions. There are many more that you can think through doing, and your quad counselor can help you figure out exactly which opportunities from this long list are best suited for you.
I just want to jump in here just really quick also to just share something that I've seen a number of students go through in my work advising them. I think that there's a lot of emphasis placed on by some students, those like summer programs, the pre-college summer programs that happen at a college or university. It's geared towards a pre-med student. Usually they're relatively expensive, and you're paying a couple $1,000s to go live on a college campus and hear from doctors and do lab experiments, all these things. And those are awesome. I just want to just throw in there that should not be what you do every single summer. A lot of those are awesome, and they're great at exposing you to, different types of medicine or different stories that different doctors have, and just what it's like to live in college in general. And I'm absolutely not discrediting them in any way. And I think that you should totally pursue that if that's something you want to explore. But some of them are a little bit more what I would call just passive, where you're just kind of showing up and you're taking in this experience really to set yourself apart. You might want to have something like that in addition to a research project where you are actually creating that project and taking leadership, initiative, and ownership over something, or where you're volunteering and you're actually going in and doing something. And so a mix of those types of experiences is awesome. But I think that sometimes students just focus on, oh, well, I really want to go to this, this prestigious program at this prestigious sounding university. That's not always everything. Sometimes it really is just showing up to work at your local hospital every day that's going to give you the most, initiative or the best way to involve yourself in a very direct way that shows that you've actually experienced what it's like to work in a medical setting, potentially more than you would get, or in a different way than you would get in one of those types of programs. And so don't just look at the name of something or think, well, this must be prestigious because it has a fancy name on it. Really look at what you're doing and what you're going to get out of every experience, and then kind of weigh from there what's going to help craft that story that you're looking for.
All right. So to wrap this up, we'll talk a little bit about what you should be thinking about as you start college and are thinking about the MCAT and the med school application process, and how just the different pieces of that you want to start thinking about from first day of freshman year of college.
All right. So I can jump in on this one too. So this is just kind of a brief overview of everything that's to come. If you are at all familiar with the college application process, which I'm sure most of you are somewhat familiar, this looks pretty similar. And so you have number one, your MCAT, which is the admissions test for medical school, very similar to, I guess, analogous to the SAT or the ACT, a little bit different in the sense that it is much more focused on kind of content knowledge and what you know about biology, chemistry, math, et cetera, as opposed to the SAT and ACT, which are a little bit more reasoning focused. So that's one thing that you'll absolutely need to spend some time preparing for. It is a huge undertaking. A lot of students will just focus on that for an entire year, take a gap year to study for it. Some students will study for it over an entire summer or take that time off from work or whatever it may be. Not something you have to do, but it kind of just gives you a sense of the magnitude of the test if you're not going to take an entire block of time off from work or school, which again, it's just not feasible for everybody. It does just take a long time. So if you're going to just block it in after work or after school or whatever it may be, it may take you many, many months to prepare for this. This isn't the kind of thing that you just kind of are ready to do just because you did your pre-med track classes. That being said, you also have your course prerequisites. This is where the pre-med track comes in. Your transcripts will be submitted. And so just like when you apply to college and you send in your transcripts with all of your grades and your GPA, same thing will happen when you apply to medical school. It'll come from your college. You'll have a personal statement, which again, very similar, if not the same thing, to what you are submitting to your school. So you'll basically have to say, here's who I am, here's why I want to do this, here's this experience that's shaped me and where I'm kind of headed in the future. This is where those extracurriculars really come into play. What types of experiences have shaped you and have really kind of made you realize why you want to do what you want to do, and how can you speak to that, and how can you speak to the skills and the character that you've cultivated during your time in college. Letters of recommendation, again, no surprise, same thing. Be that person, be the kind person, the helpful person, the person that exemplifies all of the traits that you would like to see in a doctor, and make sure that you're building those relationships so it's not a point of stress to ask for letters of rec. I would argue this is a lot harder in college, I think, because you could theoretically skate by all of college without ever talking to one of your professors. Probably not the whole time, but you really are not, I guess, in a position to need to talk to them quite as much as you would be with your teachers in high school. It's a little bit more independent. So you really, really have to go out of your way to build those relationships. So it's just something to keep in mind. Extracurriculars, we already talked quite a bit about. And then finally, the interviews are a much bigger part of this process than they are the college admissions process. And the college admissions process, some schools may not even offer interviews. And if they do, it may be like what I mentioned before with an alumni as opposed to someone who's on the admissions committee. Interviews for med school are usually much more involved and require you most of the time to visit the school and, spend time there, et cetera. And so just when it gets to that point, that'll just be a big piece of the application as well. If anyone has anything to add, please jump in.
All right. Well, that's all the content we have for you. If you have any questions, pop those in the Q&A box and we will answer as many of those as we can. One question we have is, can an international student study pre-med in the US, such as biomedical engineering or something along those lines?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, as long as, you have to go through, obviously, the admissions process, and sometimes the requirements can be slightly different for international applicants to get into an undergrad program. But once you get there, you have access to all of the resources and coursework and everything. So biomedical engineering would be definitely kind of a specific major and program. You can absolutely do that and pre-med. I think it's probably a little bit harder, but it's definitely something you can do if you are willing and you have the fortitude to do so.
Mm-hmm. A lot of my advisees over the years were international students when I was working at college campuses doing the pre-med track. So it's absolutely doable.
Do either of you have any advice for finding good pre-med advisors in college?
I do. I think it's important to ask these questions and look on college websites when you're in the process of considering your schools. You want to look at placement rates, not just did students get into medical schools, because the answer is always going to be yes, but did they get into their top 2 or 3 medical schools, and what was your placement rates there? How often do students meet with their pre-med advisor? When does pre-med advising start? These are all questions that you can be asking at info sessions and on tours, and as you're getting to participate in virtual info sessions with a variety of colleges and universities as you're building out your school list. Increasingly, schools are making this information available on their websites. So you can go to the school that you're considering and you can Google pre-med advising. And if they've put time and thought into it, there will be an advising office or a dean or an entire program, depending on the size of the institution. A lot of schools put up a flow chart and a timeline of what students at their particular university need to be focusing on and at what stage. And then they give you some different choices if you're planning on studying abroad, if you're planning on a gap year, and how to sequence things and how to think it all through. So it's a great question to ask, and it's a great topic to interact with the institutions with about as you're deciding where you're going to apply.
Great. See, do either of you have any perspectives on BSMD programs? Jennifer, I know you work with a lot of BSMD students.
Yep, BSMDs are the needle in the haystack, and so I have a couple of thoughts to offer there, and Dominique, I'd be interested in your thoughts here as well. I think that they can be really good options for students who have known for a very long time that they want to be going into the medical field, and they know exactly what they want to practice, and they are comfortable making an 8-year commitment to an institution, to be in one place at one institution for that entire time. I think that sometimes students are drawn to BSMD programs because they don't want to take the MCAT. And the number of BSMD programs that completely don't require the MCAT is decreasing, because the MCAT is actually a very valid instrument to assess learning that's going to be needed in medical school. So an increasing number of BSMD programs are bringing on either a modified MCAT score that's required of students in order to progress, or to take a practice and achieve a certain score. So don't think of it only as a way to get out of an MCAT, is my encouragement to students who are thinking about this, and also to be super comfortable with the idea that you know that you want to be a physician, because you're preparing a high school, you're preparing an undergraduate application and a medical school application to be reviewed by the medical school admissions team. You're doing both of those things at the same time as a high school graduating senior. So you need to have tremendous depth in your extracurriculars that demonstrates your commitment to the field. You need to be able to pass an interview, which is very challenging even for college seniors or college students to be able to really do well in those interviews. But for a high school senior to be able to do well in those interviews really takes something extra special. And that's reflected in the admissions rates. You'll see admissions rates in the single digits, aside from a few programs that have a little bit more capacity to admit students. So it can be a great option for students who are very focused, and it's also important to know that it's the right choice for you in particular.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have much to add to that because I agree with all of it. I would say just the only other piece to think about is, as Jennifer mentioned, these applications are so involved. One, you have to know for sure that this is what you want to do. It's a huge commitment, but also they are so competitive that you need to basically have, like we already mentioned, right, all of your stuff, everything that says, here are my extracurriculars, here's my coursework, blah, blah, blah. All of the things that say I want to be a doctor kind of 4 years early. So it needs to be extra strong in that way. And if you're pouring yourself into this application and, really giving this your all, you may not have the time and space and capacity to apply to other schools and other programs that you would if you just didn't pursue it, right? And so if you're not super sure and you're just doing it to get out of the MCAT, or you're just kind of throwing your hat in the ring, you're actually taking away from your capacity to apply to other programs that you might be a much better fit for, or that might be a much better match for you just admissions wise. And so that would be, just kind of think about that, right? Don't just throw your hat in the ring just to say you applied. drain a ton of energy and time, and then not be able to apply to as many or with as much or with as strong of an application as you would be able to some of the other schools that would be a great fit for you.
Great. Thank you both. Someone else is asking, what are some of the majors within a pre-med track that can be taken that allow for an alternate career choice if med school or the med track doesn't work out? And I'll just blanket statement and say that really any major you can do so much with, not just med school, but I'll let you both dive into that a little bit more.
A number of my students who weren't sure did a public health major if that was available, or like Dominique described, kind of making one fit. Increasingly, schools have that option now as a major or a minor. And so that can be really helpful, and you can be prepared to go into a number of health-related fields that are not clinical if you pursue that major in particular. And then the world's your oyster after that. You can major in any kind of science that you're interested in and go on and do research at a PhD level in that field, or get a master's degree and be very marketable in a number of industries or research organizations, if that's your passion. But the most important thing is to really be thinking through what is your passion, and if the medical track doesn't work out for you, what would be your second choice, and then be thinking of how to prepare in that.
Yeah. And then I would also just say, like, use me as an example, right? You can fully pursue medical school. I was an anthropology major. I was a teacher for a few years after college, and now I work in business, right? And so I have really had to lean on my transferable skills and being able to say, hey, this, my work in business has nothing to do with the anthropology major I had in college, but let me tell you a little bit about what I learned about staying organized, what I learned about thinking critically, what I learned about writing clearly and communicating all of these things, right? And so there's just a ton of transferable skills. And I don't want to say your major doesn't matter, because of course it matters to your story and your life, and just what you want to be learning and the skills that you're going to have, the hard, tangible skills that you're going to have. But, there's just so much room. Going to college at 18, I would argue that I personally maybe should have taken a gap year or two. I wasn't super sure what I wanted to do. And I spent a lot of time on that pre-med track because I didn't know what else to do, even though I knew deep down that probably wasn't it for me. And so really just being honest with yourself about what you are enjoying and what you're not enjoying, and not being afraid to make those pivots. There is always a chance to pivot at every corner. You can change your major during college. You can, pursue a master's program after college in something completely unrelated to what you did in college. You can also decide you want to do medicine really late and do a post-bac where you do a couple of years of the pre-medical courses after college in a different college program, because you didn't know that you wanted to do it early on. So there's always these moments in these programs, and just different ways to pivot, whether it be kind of like what I've done, which is just kind of selling the transferable skills that I have. Obviously, some jobs you can't just walk in and say, hey, I'm a good writer and I'm good at communicating, give me a job in biomedical engineering. But there's always a way to kind of pivot into a certain path, whether it's through a degree or an internship or whatever it may be. So don't worry too much about, well, what's my backup plan? But just, try to pick something that you feel like you would enjoy doing outside of medicine. And then hopefully the pieces will fall into place. And if not, there'll always be a way to figure it out.
Great. All right. Another question we have is, do you have to go to a prestigious or Ivy League undergrad to get into a good med school program, or to have really good pre-med classes?
So definitely not. I'm glad that you asked this question, because it's a point that I think is really worth considering. I often talk to my students about the whole arc of their academic plans. And if you are aiming for a certain prestigious medical school, or a school that specializes in a certain field, that medical school is going to do the same thing that a college or university does. It's not going to take all of the top students from one high school in Chicago. It's going to want to have a diverse representation of many different institutions. And so it's important that you know that you can excel at the institution where you're choosing to do your undergraduate work, excel academically, excel personally, excel in research, in all of the aspects of life that are important. The key ones for medical school evaluations being in your academic areas and your research and your clinical experience, so that you know that you have a competitive advantage in applying to some of the more hard to get into schools, or the schools that may have a special focus that a lot of students interested in pursuing that one area of clinical practice in particular are going to be wanting to apply to. So it's not like if I go to Columbia, I'm going to get into Columbia Medical School. I go to Harvard, I'm going to get into Harvard Med School. Harvard Med School is going to take students from across the US. They want to have a diverse student body enrolling and pursuing the medical degree from their school. So it's very important to consider all of those things at the front end.
Great. Well, thank you both for all of this information. I know I learned a lot. I'm sure everyone who joined us did as well. I want to thank everyone for joining us. I appreciate you spending your evening with us. Definitely reach out to us on our website if you have any questions, especially specific to your circumstances. We can help you figure out the best path and help you navigate this whole application process and thinking about pre-med and med school in the future. Jennifer and Dominique, thank you so much for being here. It was great to see you both. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.